Good day, everyone. My name is Ryan Todd. I'm the host of Beyond the Checkbox, where we learn from frontline leaders about mental health in our workplace. And today's guest is Sheena Davis, who is the director of Total Rewards and has worked in HR for many years. And she's at a company called Apache Industrial Services. This conversation is really exciting because she has come back from multiple maternity leaves. And this is a topic that we don't talk enough about. How do we support mothers coming back? How do we support mothers while they're on maternity leave? How do we maintain that job flow and that performance and make them feel, help them feel included and also performing at the level at which they want to perform? These are all tough questions. And like there's a bit of I wanna say stigma around the topic. Like, it's a touchy, sensitive topic, so Sheena was great enough to come onto the show and, discuss some of these really important topics, specifically around how do we support mothers, and what was her experience on maternity leave. I think this will be really useful for managers who might be struggling with this, how to support someone who's on maternity leave, or mothers who are going on maternity leave. I know my wife, who is a physician, went on 2 maternity leaves with our kids, and it was tough for her, right? There's a lot of pressure around coming back maybe earlier, not losing your residency position, all these types of things that go through her mind. And I want to talk about it because that's what we do on the show. We talk about the tough issues so we can learn from each other. So super grateful that Sheena came on the show. And thank you, as always, for joining Beyond the Checkbox. You are listening to Beyond the Checkbox, a podcast that focuses on leading strategies around bringing more mental well-being into the workplace. My name is Ryan Todd. I'm a psychiatrist and the CEO of Adversity. I'm sitting down with industry-leading change makers to break down their process and see how they are going above and beyond for their workforce mental well-being. Today, I mostly wanted to talk about your experience in coming back from a leave, maternity leave in particular, because I think that's it isn't something that we always talk about. And I think it's also something that we don't get enough like lived experience on. And then I find that managers don't always know how to handle it or what to say. And I don't want to say stigma. There's not stigma around maternity leave, but it's a bit touchy, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll definitely say it's touchy. Now I've kind of gone through a couple different maternity leaves, 3 now. So each experience I'll say has definitely been different for me, just being at home, right? Like kind of my first go around going on maternity leave, right? I was really nervous, because I was having twins, right? That was definitely something that I was not expecting to have. I never had a baby. Now I'm going to be having 2. It was like,
Whoa.
man, how am I going to manage work and have 2 kids, right? What was going through my mind was my boss going to be thinking that I was going to be just as dedicated to my work coming back? Like, was I not going to be looked at for certain positions because now I had kids? How was I going to have flexibility? But that first time they actually were really flexible with me. They allowed me to have the time that I needed, to kind of go through a whole process. So if I kind of take a step back that first time, like a lot of women, I had a lot of fertility issues. So we needed to go through the IVF process.
Yeah.
And not only on your body, but on your mind. IVF is really hard and it's also time consuming. So my first job, they were very supportive of that. So having a flexible time to be able to go to all of those appointments was definitely needed. I don't know if I would have been able to do that without having that. So for me, having the flexibility at the job allowed me to kind of go through, all of those appointments that I kind of needed to do to go through that process. It was very emotional as well. I wasn't sure if it was going to work out. It finally actually did in 2018. And that's when we, kind of realized that we were going to be having twins, and we were thinking, oh my goodness, how was I going to cook? How was I going to clean? How was I going to go to the grocery store? This was all on top of kind of recovering from a C-section. How was I going to do all of those things. So that was pretty emotional being on leave and trying to navigate kind of that process at the same time as trying to figure out my career at that moment.
And are you thinking like you have twins? And like I remember when I had my wife, I didn't have the baby. I hate when people say we are pregnant. We are not pregnant. When my wife and I had our first kid, it's like survival mode for the first 3 to 6 weeks. But I've always wondered, for people who are really ambitious, dedicated to their company and their career, are you also thinking a little bit about work? And if so, is there some guilt associated with that?
Absolutely. I mean, the entire time that I was taking my leave, I was thinking about work. Like,
Really?
how was I going to manage the work pace that I was doing prior to that? Was I going to be able to sustain that afterwards? I felt guilty. Like, am I not going to be able to take care of my kids in the way that I would need to? Right. I needed to put my kids in daycare so that I could actually go back to work. And actually on that first leave, I was reached out by a recruiter for a new position, a total rewards position. And I was hesitant at first, but I was thinking, man, this could be a great opportunity for my career. But it was like, man, I was already struggling going back to a job that I had already known.
Yeah.
And now it was like trying to think, can I actually go and do something else so I can further my career? And I took that leap with, the support of my husband. And I'm actually here 5 years later, still with Apache. So that was the job that I actually took during that time. But then each leave after, absolutely. This last time I kept thinking, okay, this is an unplanned baby right before annual enrollment. I just had a new person join my team.
Yeah.
Was I setting my team up for success? Were they going to need me? I thought, is my boss going to come to some crazy realization that she didn't need me? So that was really difficult kind of this time. I wanted to know what was going on. Do you need anything? And everybody was like, hey, take the time. But for me, I felt guilty not being there at that moment.
I mean, yeah, I that would be tough. Like I honestly, in all vulnerability, if I take a week of holidays, I have that paranoia. Like, am I even needed? And it's not like, am I wanted? It's like, am I of use to this company? And like, how am I going to be perceived in taking that time? And we're talking about a normal week of holiday. So I could imagine that there is just that's exponential when it comes to taking 6, 9, 12 months. And then, yeah, on top of it, like you're dealing with like 2 children, which is just like parenting is just double black diamond difficult, at least for me. And so I would describe it as paranoia and how I experienced that. Like, am I still needed at this company? And it drives to the core of your whole career, all your choices.
Yeah. I brought it up to my boss, to Samantha, multiple times. Like, hey, do you need this? Hey, do you need this? She's like, hey, we're good. Don't worry about it. But for me, like, I needed those little check-ins to make sure that I was kind of still needed. And, this last time I also had 3 kids then, that on top of the new baby that I had just had. Right. So I had feelings of guilt of, was I giving all the other kids enough attention?
Yeah.
Right. I had the twins now 5 years old. Jackson was 3 years old. And then this new baby that I just kind of had. I also had a lot of feelings of, I guess, guilty as well, that it was my 4th boy. I felt like I had kind of failed my husband in a way, right? I wasn't going to have a girl. So that was kind of weighing on top of me as like, man, I didn't do what I needed. He's never going to have that daddy's girl. He's never going to be able to do daddy daughter dances and everything like that. Like, I know I'm super blessed, right? I have 4 healthy children, but at the same time of trying to like manage work, I'm at home thinking I did something wrong. So that, also kind of weighed a lot on me.
I never even thought of that. And like the idea that you are responsible for that or feel responsible is really interesting. And I remember when I was in medical school, I did a lot of obstetrics for some reason. I didn't particularly enjoy obstetrics, so much so that I became a psychiatrist. But there was one couple that I remember, like they're burned into my memory, that they had a baby girl and the husband wanted a baby boy. And there was such a like cold, like usually it's a celebration, right? Like 99 out of 100 times. But the wife kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And I couldn't really figure out what was going on. And then one of the nurses explained to me the cultural context, and that, poor woman felt responsible for like making a mistake and having a girl. I couldn't get my head around it at the time. And it was a really horrible feeling in that delivery room. And the thing that stuck out to me is like, you feel responsible for like even the gender of the child. And it sounds like that was weighing on you even in this leave for you.
Yeah, it definitely did. I think I felt that I let my parents down as well. There's actually video. We were doing the announcement of, what the gender was. And I had already known. I didn't really tell my folks that I knew. So trying to act like kind of surprised, but knowing it beforehand, I wanted to be able to prepare myself and not have, like a breakdown on a video. But what happened was my mom had a breakdown on the video because she felt so bad for me as well, which then made me feel all over again, kind of guilty of like, I didn't give her that granddaughter, although she has 2 other granddaughters from my brothers, which also then weighed on me as well. Why did I get all boys and my brothers get that girl?
Yeah.
So, I kind of since have come to the realization that I'm good. I feel very whole. I feel like my family's complete. I can't imagine actually raising girls at this point because my boys are like boys, mud, dirt, worms. Not even sure I would know how to. I mean, I guess I probably played with a lot of dirt and mud and sand when I was growing up as well. But I'm thinking, man, I don't even know if I'd be able to do it. So I've definitely kind of come full circle. I've reached out. I had to get support. I had to work through a lot of those feelings. I think even at the time that I'd met you, I was going through kind of a roller coaster time. After my second child, I kind of, had post C-section complications, right? My body wasn't bouncing back the way that it did the first time. And, society has those unrealistic expectations of what a woman's body should be, right? We should be this and it should be right after, and you should be looking like that and bouncing back. And it's like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But I put that pressure on myself. I kind of isolated myself. COVID was kind of around at the time. So it made it more difficult actually.
COVID, right? Where you had your twins, I think.
Yeah. The twins, COVID happened right at their first birthday, or it just had kind of started there in Texas. With Jackson, it was kind of already happening, but in 2021, right, there were still a lot of restrictions, right? So it kind of made going out harder.
Yeah.
So I already felt isolated. I didn't know really who to talk to. Thinking back, I kind of wish that I joined, maybe a support group to kind of get through that and know each pregnancy, each time you take off, it's going to be different. You're going to have different feelings, emotions, work through different things.
That's, I think, a really important message for folks who listen to the podcast and are either on a mat leave or thinking about it, or managers who are supporting, is that every experience is going to be different, because you think like, oh, I've done this once, it's going to be a blueprint, but you had very different experiences for all of your maternity leaves. And the key I'm hearing was that you had people at Apache in your company who are flexible. And can you take me through what you mean by flexible? So I think a lot of people are wondering, how do I support somebody who's on maternity leave? Do I just stay quiet? Like, do we do the announcement and the gifts at the start, and then we don't hear from them for 9 months? Like, how do you support in the interim? That's what I'm wondering and questioning my own ability on how to do that as a manager.
Yeah. Each of my experiences were so different. I would say, though, that I've had really good managers at every company, and every time they would reach out. It wasn't just like you said, here's some gifts, bye, enjoy your time. They reached out. Hey, how are you doing? Whether it was weekly, bi-weekly, do you need anything? Hey, we can send food, if there's your need something to kind of help you during that transition
So
time.
you didn't experience that as like, my boss is hounding me, they're being a pain in the ass. You experienced that as supportive and they're checking in.
Yes.
Okay.
Each time, I really did have a good group of team members and managers and even company that were very supportive in the decision of me having kids and being at home and being able to take the full time. Like I know you had talked about 6, 9, here we kind of take that 12 weeks time, and I was able to take all of that, 12 weeks and kind of process it. But for me, like what I would do as a manager, I've had employees who take that, is allow them to kind of talk if they want to talk, like reach out, but not push it, right? Like not force them to kind of have the conversation if they want to open up, but encourage it. Say, hey, I've had these feelings. If you have that, like, let's talk about it. Let's share stories. I have plenty of stories to share. Let's share, struggles that you might be going through. How can we support you as a team? How can we make the transition coming back easier for you? Whether that's, just lighter workload kind of in the beginning, right? As you kind of get your feet back into it. Because that's also your brain is in like, I'm breastfeeding a kid or bottle feeding, or you're trying to figure out all the stuff at home. And now you're like, ooh, I got to add in like meetings on top of all of that and figuring out like the work schedule and the home schedule and everything like that. So flexibility might be the time to go to the appointments, right? We all know that the kids need to go to those checkups in the beginning. It's each month, and then it's each year. Allow them to take the time to go to those and not feel guilty. I never felt pressured like, oh, now you got to take a whole PTO day because you were gone for an hour. Right.
What are the things that make you feel, I want to just dig into that because I think that is so important that like in medicine, we call it the unwritten curriculum, and it's the things that are unspoken. And some might even call it like in the DEI space, like microaggressions, but it's the things that are unspoken that are subtle that make you feel guilty about something that that you're doing right. So what were the things that were supportive? But I also want to hear, what are the things that would have made you feel guilty or unsupported? Like, what are some of the nuances around that?
Sure. I think if they were like, hey, when are you coming back? Right. Like keep questioning the time of like, when are you coming back? Are you going to be able to do this? Hey, right when you come back, we're going to have this project, like multiple things right back to back.
Okay.
I think that would have made it harder to kind of, I don't want to say enjoy, but you should be enjoying maternity leave, right?
Sure.
You should be bonding with your baby. You should be recovering and not maybe thinking about work, having that space away, but if a manager is constantly each week, hey, when you get back, we're going to have this. Hey, when you do this, we're going to do this, right? Your brain is not able to kind of like shut off. So I would say allow, if your employee wants to be able to shut off. For some people, including me, having a little bit of a check-in and knowing what was going on actually made me feel more comfortable that, okay, when I come back, it's not going to be all over the place.
Yeah.
Especially like this last time, right? Like I said, it was right before annual enrollment. I wanted to just kind of have mini check-ins with my team of, do you need anything? So while they might have been checking in on me, do you need anything while you're at home? For me, it made me feel better knowing that they were also taken care of, because I felt guilty leaving them. That's that's a big time to go through annual enrollment alone, with a new person who is just getting trained up. So I would say reaching out, but allow your employees to kind of have that space if they want to kind of chat. I think, coming back, we should have more conversations just on leave in general, make them, make sure that we have a mother's room set up if that's a choice that they're going to want to do when they come back, right? I didn't have to deal with that piece because I work remote now, but some women, they feel pressure to go back to work right away because they can't afford not to go back to work right away. Yeah. So at least making sure when they transition back that they are comfortable, right? They have the space if they're going to be pumping, if they need, time to just have a break from whether it's just that or just work, just to process through things. And again, it still goes back to flexibility. Like that for me was the number one thing. I needed to be like, hey, my kid is sick. I need to, be at home to be able to take care of that. And my team knows that for them, that's something that I want them to feel comfortable knowing they can do that as well. Your kid is sick. What are you going to do? Like have a sick kid at school? No, I want them to be able to feel good that they can go home, take care of their kid, take them to the doctor's appointment, and that we're going to be supportive at work to cover something if they need coverage at work and not feel, oh my God, I'm going to come back and I have all this work that still needs to get done. So having a really good supportive group can really go a long way in my mind.
There's like I think the stigma or the gray zone in this conversation comes down to performance. Like I think with someone like you work hard and you're on top of things and you're transparent and you're proactive and you're a good communicator. Like what do managers do when that's not the case and there's a maternity leave or somebody returning? Like, do you have thoughts on how that should be approached? And the basic question I have is somebody coming back from a maternity leave, and let's say they've been back for 3 or 4 months and the performance is just not there. And maybe it's because they're a new mother and that's a massive undertaking. And maybe it's other reasons. Should that be approached differently than someone who's just like not having a baby and not performing? Do you think there's considerations there around performance when a new mother is coming back to work?
That's hard.
It's so hard.
For me, it kind of can go both ways. Maybe I'm a little bit more black and white that I think people, yes, we have our lives that are outside of work and we might need that flexibility and things to get it done. But I still think that work kind of needs to get performed. So if I was a manager, I would be doing the same kind of check-ins, I think, with any employee, whether they just had a kid or not, because somebody's going to have some other situation that's potentially affecting them at home, right? Yeah. Whether somebody had passed away, just even one of my best friends actually passed away here in December. I was just coming back from maternity leave. She passed away. So it's just, I felt like there was another thing on top of that, right? So just because somebody had a baby, in my mind, like I don't necessarily think that they should be treated differently. I think everybody across the board should just be treated that they could have some sort of circumstance at home that a manager might not be aware of. So I think just checking in with your employees, right? I have a meeting weekly with my employees. We meet as a group. I'm open to individual conversations if they want. I check in. How's work doing? How's your family? How's home? I try to balance of like, how are you doing personally with how is work going to make sure that they're just supported in general. Do you have the tools to do your job? Do we have an SOP that can help you with this process? Do you need more trainings that are available to you? So again, I don't necessarily think it's just because somebody's on leave. I think a good manager just checks in and is readily available for their employees at any time to make them successful. So if somebody's not maybe performing, ask the questions. What's going on? How can I help you? What are the tools that you need so we can get you back on track? Because originally I thought, man, I was going to be a teacher one day when I was back in school. And so I think instinctively I think about that. I want to see people grow. I want to see them learn. So automatically I try to set up a plan for my employees of like how they can get to their career goals. So even before maybe life throws them a bunch of curveballs, I'm trying to think a couple steps ahead of how I can get them to be successful in their careers. Because to me, if my team is successful, then I'm successful.
I think it's an awesome perspective. And I wonder if we could kind of approach the other side where, do you think there's a risk of being, I don't want to say patronizing, but like patronizing or coddling somebody coming back from a leave, like too much, to the point where they feel like not included, or like there seems to be a balance there because you want to be flexible, but you don't want to like baby that individual. They're adult professionals. And just like my bias is that when we are interviewing, if we have a mother who we're interviewing and they've had kids, automatically that person in my mind is a much more resilient person and I think I'm more resilient too after having kids because of just all the things that life throws at you after post kids. So my bias is that there's more resilience there. And because there's a bit of a touchiness around the topic, I think sometimes our tendency is to like coddle mothers returning from a maternity leave. Do you think that's a risk, or is that just like me being paranoid? Like, how much do you want to include and drive metrics and KPI and drive performance for a new mother coming back from maternity leave?
Yeah, I haven't thought too much about that. Like, I haven't thought like, hey, might be coddling somebody. I kind of, at least how I approach it as a manager for anybody is I kind of take all of that out of the equation. So I don't, maybe my mind doesn't go there to kind of coddle them just because they had a certain situation. I try to let the employee drive, how they might be handled, because each employee is going to be totally different. You might be thinking you're coddling one employee and you're actually not, kind of from their viewpoint. So yeah, I guess maybe you could do it a little over, but I would think, or I'd hope that the employee might say like, hey, I'm good. I'm good here. I kind of just take it they're back at work and they're ready to go.
Yeah.
Right. I feel, hey, they're here. They want to work. They've expressed that. We're good to go. And let's just go from there. And it's, then you can obviously have conversations about kids and how things are going sidebar. But when it comes to work, maybe I'm a little bit more black and white, like we're at work, let's work.
Yeah.
And I like to work hard. And then afterwards, play and all that.
Let's talk about childcare, Sheena, for a bit, because I think this has been a really important issue throughout COVID. There's a lot of research to show that mothers, in particular mothers with young children, had worse mental health outcomes, and I think that makes sense to me. There was a what was the journal? There was a famous medical journal that published a study on that. And it was like young, like 20 to 25-year-olds and young mothers who had the worst delta in mental health outcomes during COVID. And the Lancet, sorry, that was the journal. And so let's talk about supports for childcare. Like, we were fortunate to have a decent amount of support. If you don't have family, like not everyone can, like daycare is expensive to bring in, like a nanny, super expensive. Family isn't always around. What can workplaces do to help accommodate that? And do you see that as an ongoing issue? Because I thought it was a massive issue during COVID. How do we support mothers, especially young mothers, with like care? Because we're all at home at all time. What can we do to help?
Yeah. So I actually had an employee during that time that couldn't get care for her youngest. So her oldest three, one was in school, the other two were in daycare. And at the time when she had a newborn, there weren't any schools kind of available for a couple months, so she wanted to work hard. So I kind of allowed her to work at home with the newborn. Her schedule kind of obviously shifted a little bit, right? Because there's times you got to feed the baby, you got to do this, but she was a good worker and I knew she wanted to kind of be there. So I supported her in that for a couple months until she was able to kind of get a spot of, hey, how can I help you so we can get the work done while you're at home being able to take that care of your child? Because she didn't have family, to be able to also maybe step in and watch while she was waiting for that. I too did not have family close by when we were living in Texas. My family is all in New Jersey. Yeah. So for me, I really relied on childcare to make sure. And yeah, during COVID, there were some times where maybe the schools closed. I kind of lucked out a little bit. At least the daycare that I took my kids to were very close to the hospital. And so they stayed open for essential workers. So my husband and I were able to still send our kids at that time to school. But I knew people that they didn't have that option, right? So I think you still need to be flexible with people to do that. I mean, what are you going to say? Like, sorry, you don't have anybody to watch your kids. You can't work.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe somebody
bad.
would do that. But to me, you have these relationships with your employees. They're not just employees to me. I really try to build relationships with them and I want to support them at work, but I also want to support them at home. So I think companies, managers, they need to work together with the employees to help figure that out. How can moms do both if they want to? How can we help them get there? In each instance, it is going to be different because each person is different. How they approach work, how they approach raising their kids is going to be different. So managers just need to be open to having the conversations and have them early on, and keep it open. Like, don't just assume that everybody's doing okay. They're at home and things are getting done. Say, hey, what can I do to change your schedule? What can I do with your workload to make it easier while you're in this transition period?
Yeah, and it's dawning on me that there's no policy that you can just set around one size fits all. Corgi had this study pulled up. I don't know if you could see, Sheena. The Lancet Psychiatry at the COVID impact, at the time point during COVID, a higher proportion of mothers had clinically significant depression and anxiety than at all previous data collection time points. So yeah, there you go. It was a large study too, 3,300 women of various kind of backgrounds. And then they point out sort of in this article, the obvious stuff, balance home and school responsibilities. But it doesn't really have specifics. Avoid the school closures might be a key priority. Yeah, that in hindsight might have been like a good thing for our mental health. But yeah, the data is very real that we've experienced, mothers experience more strain and stress during these times that we don't have support.
Yeah, I can imagine people that might have had older children, right? Mine were a lot younger, so they weren't necessarily doing schoolwork that I needed to help them with.
Yeah.
Right. So I think if people had older children that were in schools that were just automatically closed, or they're doing virtual, I'm trying to picture doing virtual with my kids. I mean, 5-year-olds, I think it was a couple of weeks ago, they first got on like a video chat and they thought it was like the funniest thing. They couldn't even get over seeing themselves on camera. Yeah. So I'm trying to picture them actually doing schoolwork at the same time. Yeah, you're trying to be on a Zoom call. I am at home right now with Hunter, half day, and sometimes mommy's in meetings, and having to have those conversations of, hey, we can't just come downstairs. Mommy's on a call. Oh, I want to see what you're doing. So I think we just need to be, again, I keep going back to flexible, but I think times are changing. We can't just be, you're in your seat from 8 to 5, 9 to 5, whatever the case may be. I need to see you on camera at all times. I need to know what you're doing. People need to trust that they've hired people to do the job that they hired them to do. Yeah. Trust that they're going to get the work done. And I think once people feel that they have that support, that, hey, I was hired to do this, my manager's not micromanaging me, they're allowing me to do this and kind of get it done, and I'm going to get it done in the time frame that I maybe have said and set out to do, that it gets done. People have less stress that, oh my God, they're probably watching me through my camera. They're making sure that I'm doing this. They're emailing me constantly. I am Amy. Where am I at with this project? So as a manager, I don't micromanage because I don't like to be micromanaged. I want people to feel empowered for the role that I, had employed them to do, and see where they can go. Take that on.
You're obviously you're in HR and total rewards. Are you seeing more benefits to accommodate mothers and even fathers on paternity leave? Like, I'm seeing more fertility benefits. I think that's probably a trend in the last kind of 5 to 7 years, as a retention tool for trying to keep talented mothers in the workplace. Have you seen that movement, or is it? I've picked up on it kind of peripherally, but there seems to be more benefits, especially around fertility. Like, that's a thing now in the benefits world, it seems like.
Yeah, I've heard of a lot of the different fertility options that a lot of companies, each state here in the US, it kind of does their own thing of potentially what a company might need to offer or not offer outside of just like a company. But I have seen kind of that trend uptick of what they might cover. I've had friends that are like, oh, mine covers the cost of IVF for 2 different times. And that automatically can take stress off. I didn't have that. So my husband and I, we had to think, how much is it going to cost to go through IVF? How much do we need to save? Because that's the last thing on top of trying to have a baby is to think about how much money it's going to cost. But then also afterwards is leave, not only maternity leave, but just parental leave in general, right? If you're at home trying to recover and your husband or your support person can't take time off and you're there alone, that's even harder. And if you don't have family. So, we've seen trends of parental leave being a big thing for keeping people around, right? Like just even a week or 2 weeks just to kind of get in the swing of things and you're not alone instantly with a baby. So yeah, I've definitely seen more benefits. We have actually introduced when women come back to work, not only like the mother's room, but we have a whole program where we can send them a pump. If they're remote or if they're in the office, we have a larger pump and we have all the things that are needed if they wanted to take advantage of that. So it's the last thing they need to think about is carrying a bag in, right? Having a refrigerator, having all the tools necessary to kind of do that. So yes, I do think that there's a trend in offering more for women that want to come back to work as well as, obviously take care of kids at home.
Sheena, do you think about this differently in the field? Because for those of you who aren't as familiar with the Apache Industrial Services, I would say it's probably 80% frontline male workforce. Is that a fair number?
Yeah, that's probably fair.
And then so there's, I don't know, do you think about it differently, I guess, for someone who's frontline in the field, for especially those mothers who are trying to take leave, or is it relatively kind of the same picture as those who might work in an office? Do you think about it differently? Do you have different accommodations?
I don't think I think about it differently. I try to maybe we want to make sure obviously that they're taken care of, right? If they're on site, so the site is likely going to have that room or space where they can go if they need to pump and have that. So our HR partners will make sure with our field workers that they're being kind of taken care of, whereas my team might be more all the office workers, hey, making sure we have that availability. The program that I was talking, that's for everybody. They can take advantage of it. Parental leave that we offered, that's everybody can kind of take advantage. So just because you're in a field worker versus an office worker, we're not going to say, hey, you get less time to be able to kind of do that. The support resources just in general that we have, our EAP, anything that we can have, right? Adversity, we have that platform. We want to make sure people all across have access to the tools that they need to prepare them for that. We're talking to our employees before, during the process, checking in on them. Maybe their managers aren't checking in, but my benefits team sure is checking in with those employees while they're on leave, making sure that they have everything that they need to be able to manage that and then transition back to work. So I don't think I maybe think about it differently per se of what we offer, but just how we approach might be slightly different.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. And my big takeaway from what we're chatting about is flexibility is a key. And there are policies around all this, but really some of that responsibility is downloaded to the manager to understand the nuances of their employee who's coming back and to uphold high standards of what they expect from that individual in the workplace, while at the same time understanding that they're going through a lot of physical, emotional, cognitive change coming back from a maternity leave and will rightfully need some accommodations. The other kind of point that I think is important is that is all really important because, especially in your industry, I think where there's a big push to attract women into that particular industrial workforce and retain them. So these benefits, these accommodations, and also maybe even some training for managers on how to accommodate is going to continue to be super important.
I absolutely think training. Yeah, flexibility. I definitely agree with training, giving our managers the support and toolkit to be able to handle that.
Nice.
Maybe they have never had kids before as a manager, right? If you've never, like you said, it made you kind of more resilient, or you kind of have an idea of maybe what your spouse or your partner is kind of going through. Somebody that maybe has never gone through that experience might be like, whatever, you had a kid. come back to work. What's the big deal? So I absolutely think having some training to, explain or just give them some tips of like what they can do to make that time more successful for them and their employees.
Nice. Sheena, I also want to thank you for sharing your emotional experiences around this. I think that was really helpful for people checking in and listening to this, not only for those who went on maternity leave, but there's we all run into like bereavement leave and medical leave and for various reasons. And I think your experience, I mean, it definitely resonated with me and it'll resonate with a lot of our listeners. So yeah, thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experience and
You're welcome.
teaching us
Thank you
about
for
some of
having
these
me.
items. It was a very illuminating conversation. I appreciate it very much.
I appreciate you having me. Thank you so much, Ryan.